Welcome to the AI in Education podcast. Good morning, Ray. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Dan. I'm in sunny Sydney. When the sun shines, things are great.
Yeah, well, it's even better today because we've got a fantastic podcast. Interviewees, three people from a very important report that has been released recently. Would you like to introduce them, Ray?
But Dan, we talked about this briefly on the episode last
Yes.
week. The report is the Young People Learning and Generative AI. Hey, congrats, team, because that is possibly one of the shortest paper titles that we've had
Yeah.
in the last year. I think the longest was 24 words. So, from our point of view, congrats. From an academic point of view, I'm sure people will be asking you to put more words in. So, this is great because we talked about it last week. This is the report that I wish we'd been able to compile out all of the research that we've talked about on the podcast about the impact of AI in education. It's the one that helps us to go from is AI good or bad into, yeah, but under what circumstances is it really helpful to learning and to education? We've got with us on the podcast, I'm going to talk about Matthew Hill first from Barker Institute, because Matthew, you arrived with your checkbook on behalf of the Institute in order to be able to fund this research. So you're the most important person because without you, we wouldn't have started this. But then the most important team are the team that actually wrote the report. So Natasha, Arthars, and Veronica Yang for the University of Sydney. We don't have with us two of the other authors, which includes Danny Liu and Lena, who contributed as well, also from University of Sydney. But the screen will be awfully crowded if we had everybody on it. So maybe, Matthew, I'm interested to first of all, I can call you Matt. I'm going to call you Matt.
Please do. Thanks, Ray.
Great. And I'm not going to add all of your acronyms after your name because I was really impressed with everything that I saw. But tell me, you're from the Barker Institute. For the benefit of the people, both in Australia and internationally, that are listening to this, what the heck is the Barker Institute?
Oh, thanks, Ray. Thanks, Dan. It's a pleasure to be able to have a conversation about this important topic today. The Barker Institute is a close to practice research institute situated at a school called Barker College, a co-educational independent school going from pre-K to year 12 in the northern suburbs of Sydney. And yes, we got to fund this project, but really this is just a beautiful example of partnership taking place where we integrate funding, school knowledge, academic knowledge, and then deliver this as practice in a school in order to benefit young learners. And I think the thing that I'm most excited about is the way that this partnership isn't just benefiting our school, but being able to publish this result publicly is there to be able to benefit learners and policymakers everywhere. And so that's why I'm particularly grateful that we get to contribute to this podcast. So thanks for the invitation, because we want to share this knowledge with the world.
Well, the people that listen to this podcast are the teachers, and we're constantly reminded that it's about what you do with AI and the practical things. And we talk about academic research on the podcast all of the time, but we're very picky to only talk about things that are accessible to teachers, not academic research that's published behind a paywall where it's, drop €100 to be able to read the paper, or that it's theoretical. And what I loved about this, the minute I saw it, was the fact that this is getting down to the practical. So it's really interesting that combination of a real school is effectively the key user for this research. It's not about the theory.
That's right. And that's the benefit of close to practice research. The fact that I am a high school teacher in my case, and that everyone who works within the Barker Institute is teaching classes. We are in the school. We do know what it means to know our students, and we know those very keen problems of we can't access all the literature that's needed in an easy and readable way. Now, there's ways to work it out, and you can sometimes pay, and there's contacting the authors is always a good thing. But we do need more and more practical solutions for teachers to be able to integrate academic research into their work. And it's a pleasure that this is one of the ways that we can provide that.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it is fantastic. I love the way that there's a couple of schools across Australia that do that research arm. The amount of academic teachers in Australia is getting better and better and sharper and sharper. The amount of times you catch up with a teacher and they've got a master's or a research degree in educational research and the way that you can drive actual practice, it's just really brilliant. So yeah, thanks for joining,
Yeah, what's
Matt.
really important about that is, of course, you don't need those things to be a brilliant teacher. One of the benefits of the Barker Institute is we use the rich intellectual resources of every single teacher, but that's supplemented nicely by the fact, as you said, Dan, that we do have so many people with higher research degrees also participating in the teaching space, so that we can be doing that together. And you mentioned that Australia is doing this more and more. Around the time of recording this podcast, I'm actually spending time with the Research Invested Schools National Gathering, where 70
Oh
to
wow.
100 of us are getting together from all different schools who have close to practice research initiatives similar to the Barker Institute, where we are discussing this important work and how to, again, connect the academic with the school. So it's a really exciting space, and we've got some more research that's going to be coming out in that space to support other schools and therefore other teachers to be delivering this practice.
Brilliant. Now, Natasha, I'm going to turn to you because you're the lead author of the report, and you've done something that we have got nowhere near. We talked about 300 research papers over the last 2.5 years, but the one thing we have never done is read them all at the same time to pull a picture across all of the reports. And so I am astounded and incredibly impressed that you've managed to do that, because that's the key, isn't it? Is to be able to look across lots of research and draw themes out of it.
No, thank you, Ray. It has been amazing to have the time and the space to be able to sit with such a large body of research. And I must admit, it's not a solo endeavor. Veronica was very helpful in doing that together with me. But it is a large body of research to be able to go through and to be able to look at it in a short period of time. I think it was such a fantastic opportunity. But at the same time, I acknowledge that every day new research is being published. So when we were working on this report, we conducted database searches at 3 points in time, right up until the 1st of July, so that we were able to capture everything that had been published up until the middle of the year. But it is such a fast moving space.
It's incredible how much research is coming out in that area. And you and I could geek out for hours about the different research. So let's really try not to do that. But I guess the thing that comes out early in the conversation is AI can hurt learning or it can help learning. And so I think what you've done is help us to identify the ways in which it can really be helpful and good advice around that. So I know you kind of came out with some conclusions. Maybe you want to run us through the conclusions and what do teachers need to know?
So I would say really briefly, we looked at what outcomes are possible when using Gen AI, and these were affective, cognitive, and metacognitive outcomes. And so affective is really, to put it very simplistically, how people feel, their emotions. And there is a large body of research to support improvements in engagement and motivation, which is really positive, along with reductions in anxiety. But on the cognitive front, we found evidence that Gen AI can support learning across a range of subjects. But we need to be careful when we're looking at whether it's learning or performance, because as we know, Gen AI is really helpful for creating products for the outcomes. But metacognitively, it can be designed to help prompt students thinking about their thinking, but at the same time, it can be very easy for them to offload and go straight to the answers. But essentially, when we dug further into the research, we found there were 5 different interacting conditions. And I think this is what is more interesting. And this is where you see how it depends. So there's the learner, the configuration of the Gen AI tool, the learning task, who's participating, and the broader cultural and institutional context. And perhaps Veronica and I can talk about each of those, and Matt can jump in with some examples as well.
Let me just take you back a second. You talked about affective, cognitive, and metacognitive. Now, affective, I understood, is the kind of emotional feeling, how are you feeling about things? But can you just differentiate for me? Because I think we've had too many people on the podcast talking about metacognitive, and I'm not sure I've ever stopped them and said, what? What's the difference between cognitive and metacognitive?
Okay, so a very simplistic way to think about it is cognitive is one's thinking, Metacognitive is thinking about one's thinking. So metacognition can include your capacity to monitor your thinking, to evaluate it, and to regulate your thinking.
Yeah.
So there's thinking and then thinking about your thinking, which is at a much higher level. So as you're engaged in a learning activity, you don't just need to be thinking, you need to be reflecting on your thinking and making judgments of, am I learning something here? Am I understanding? What do I need to change what I'm doing to be able to facilitate that understanding? So it's much more complex.
Ray, can I offer an example in the AI space about cognitive versus metacognitive? Well, you could set up an AI tool that's designed to create cognitive development. That is, the AI tool gives bespoke, targeted questions exactly at the need of students within the zone of proximal development to help them get to that next step of their thinking, for example, answering maths questions. However, if the AI tool does all the metacognitive work of deciding what the right question is, the only thing you develop is the cognitive skill. And so one of the challenges with AI, we create bespoke tools that only meet one need at a time on some occasions, whereas the beauty of, for example, a human teacher is that you are pursuing how can we support a student's affective needs, cognitive needs, and metacognitive needs all at the same time. So this is a beauty of AI. We can drill in and focus on one thing at a time. But there's actually the need for AI metacognitive tools that develop the metacognitive skills, thinking about thinking, what decisions are you making about what you're going to do next, as well as just actually doing the problem that you have in front of you.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, I get it now. I wish I'd asked that question a year ago. I'd have been a lot smarter for the last year. Okay, so Natasha, you talked about these 5 aspects. I think earlier you talked about them as interacting conditions. So I'm fascinated. What are the 5 things we need to know about?
Yeah, the very first is the learner. And if you think of it as a number of circles, the learner's right at the center, right? And so across these studies, we found evidence that not all students use Gen AI in the same ways, and not all students get the same benefits out of it. If I just talk about one particular aspect of this that I think is important is around help seeking. So if you think about in a classroom, there's often those students that will actively put their hand up. They'll tell you when they don't understand something. They'll keep asking questions. But then on the flip side, there's other students that are shy. They may feel more anxious and not want to say that they don't understand something. So they'll sort of sit in the background. And so there's evidence across these studies to say that those students that are less likely to actively seek help from teachers are more likely to seek help from Gen AI, which I think it's potentially a positive, right? But it depends on how they go about seeking help from Gen AI, whether they just go straight to getting answers or whether they're engaging in it in more productive ways. And again, if we think about metacognition as well, a student's metacognitive skills will impact the way that they use Gen AI and what they get out of it.
I just want to talk about implications for these areas. As Natasha said, students, they have different levels of prior knowledge, confidence, and help-seeking habits. So for teachers, that means we need to provide differentiated support for learners for using Gen AI. Like younger learners, they need more explicit modeling, clear expectations, and greater support. And for older learners, the assessment and the task design need to help them to distinguish between the beneficial and the detrimental offloading. In other words, what they can hand over for Gen AI to do and what they must keep for themselves to do during the learning process. I think Matt can share good examples of differentiated support in the school.
The best thing in the school is that one of the greatest things we do as teachers is we know our students. That's the first of the professional standards of the Australian Teaching Professional Standards, know students and how they learn. Our teachers know their students so well that we can differentiate this sort of instruction. But the reminder that we've been able to give the teachers is to look for those students who don't necessarily come to you for help because they will be likely using AI to support their learning. And this is an opportunity for us to work with them in this pursuit rather than let them go off on their own.
Yeah,
The one thing I would add to that, I think there's a lot of discussion at the moment about this idea of cognitive offloading and students going straight to the answer, and a lot of concerns that students are going to take shortcuts and cheat or do things that they're not meant to do. But I think looking at the learner, it tells us that not all students are like this. Students are very different in the way that they use Gen AI, so we shouldn't jump to conclusions that all students are going to behave in that way.
Yeah, and we did a whole series where we just talked to students, not about students, but to students. And it was amazing some of the stories we heard from how smart students are about the use of AI. And it's not all students, and you're absolutely right. There were some that really understood that it made a huge difference, the way that they would choose to interact with it. So I get it. Okay, so that's condition number one, the learner.
Yep. The next three are the tool, the task, and the social configuration or who's involved. So that's the next layer. So if we think about the design of the Gen AI tool, we have these really open tools like ChatGPT, but then we have more constrained, guardrailed, custom-built tools, and they are very different in the ways that students can interact with them. So my biggest concern is around these open, flexible tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, because it is very easy for students just to go straight to the answer or to create a product and not actually engage in the learning process. Whereas those more constrained tools can withhold answers, slow things down, and give students the opportunity to engage in the effort that is learning.
So, Matt, the question I've got then is, how do you divert your students' attention away from, oh, I asked ChatGPT the answer?
It's by providing a better alternative. So the beauty of AI is that we can create our own AI platforms and AI tools to suit our purposes. And while I don't have the technical skill to do it in a previous generation, the fact that I can use AI to do that, we can make that happen. And so students don't want to shortcut their learning, as you've experienced from your conversation with the students. They're passionate about learning, but it's just hard for them with the environment that they find themselves in, where the answer is right there. So our solution is by providing a better alternative. We want to create bespoke tools that are designed to be learning tools rather than answer tools, and offer those to the students, accepting that they're likely, when they're at home in particular, they are likely to use AI sources regardless of the advice that they've been given. And so therefore, we can provide a more of a tutor, or the beauty of this is you can actually provide a bespoke tool for any individual task. So whether it's a assignment, even an assessment, or an individual worksheet, or a particular tutorial bot to work alongside a tutorial type subject, creating that means that a student is far more likely to use that learning resource rather than an open source platform. And tools like Cogniti, which is provided through the University of Sydney that Barker has subscribed to, is a platform that allows us to create these bespoke tools to meet the student needs. And that's what we've invested in response to this literature review.
Okay, and that's heading a little bit then into the task bit, I think, Natasha is.
Yeah, it is. But a couple of things I would add to that. I don't know how Danny does it. Danny Liu, that created Cogniti. This is, as far as I know, the second useful tool that he's developed for education. Somehow, without having gone through all of this evidence, he manages to create these tools that do all of the things that they should do. It is amazing how much that tool aligns with what we found in the research. He is an absolute mastermind, to be honest. But I would say
totally
for
agree with
teachers,
that.
when they're thinking about what Gen AI tool they might use, they really need to look at it carefully, because if you think about just generally in your work life, when you're using certain Gen AI tools, sometimes you'll ask it something and it'll give you the answer, and then it'll say, do you want me to do this, or this for you next? And so it can be really easy just to click and to do what it suggests. And so thinking about, does the tool do that, or does it slow things down and give the student the opportunity to sit and think about what they want to do next, I think is really important. But the other thing is, if we look at these tools, the way that they're designed actually makes students treat them in different ways or relate to them differently. There's Snapchat, for example. It has AI that's built into a person's friend list. and it comes up with a chat saying, "Hi, friend." So it is automatically designed to position people to think of it as a friend. Other tools might be designed to position students to think of it as a tutor or a teacher. And so the design influences the way that people interact and relate to it. So I think that's really important for teachers to think about when they're looking at different tools. But if I talk about the learning task and the activity, everything's different. We give students different tasks to work on, and they have different learning objectives or learning outcomes, right? And so we need to think about, well, what is the learning outcome here? And is Gen AI use removing some of those peripheral barriers, allowing students to engage in the task, or is it doing the work for them that is leading to the learning? And I think Danny gave a really good example in our webinar yesterday. You'll remember this, Matt, with his young son who was worried that his use of Gen AI might be considered cheating. And when he talked to him about it, it was actually creating an image. And the learning goal was to create, I believe, a story. So they were able to talk through, well, what is the objective here? And is my use actually helping me, or is it hindering my learning? And how does it relate to the goal? So I think a useful way to think about this is, are we learning from Gen AI, learning with Gen AI, which means being able to do more combined with Gen AI? Are we learning about Gen AI, or are we learning through shaping Gen AI? So thinking about the learning goal and how Gen AI is being used is really important here. Veronica, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I think it's another important thing is when teachers adopt Gen AI in teaching, they could consider what are the productive friction they can enable to support students' learning by engaging them in thinking, in reflection, and also reasoning. Like another example of the different pedagogical functions of Gen AI, like learning from, with, about, and learning by shaping it. And like one activity could have more than one pedagogical function. For example, like for studying math, students could ask Gen AI to explain a difficult math concept. So they learn from it and get feedback. And they can also check their solution with Gen AI about, is there other alternative solution? And they can also, during the process, they understand what Gen AI works and in what context the limitations of Gen AI can influence their teaching. And we remember there was study we reviewed included teachable Gen AI agent. So students can teach Gen AI a math concept. It's like they are teaching, they are training the Gen AI. So they are learning by shaping Gen AI.
Yeah, Ray, it's helpful to revisit cognitive offloading in this context. Cognitive offloading is seen as this universally negative term, and in some ways rightly so, but I actually think strategic offloading is also a valuable thing that we do as teachers. The whole point of a school education is to cognitively offload the things that we don't want students' mind to be on, so that we can cognitively load the things that we do want students' minds to be on. So
Yeah.
yes, of course, if we replace the core business of what we're trying to teach with this particular task with AI, students won't learn. But if we can replace the non-core or extraneous load elements with AI, then in fact, we can target exactly what's important. Take, for example, a history task where you start with finding sources, generating ideas, coming up with an essay, producing the final product. If the point of it is to work on brainstorming, then do the human brainstorming and let the AI do the rest of the work to see where it leads. If the point is to work on your communication skills, let the AI do the brainstorming so you can work on the communication skills. So cognitive offloading is really strategic offloading, and I think that's a new way we can think about it too.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question about something I read in the report, which said Gen AI introduces a new metacognitive demand, deciding what to delegate. So we're kind of making things a little bit more complicated as well. So what gives?
Yeah, that's definitely true. So we are moving to a new skill set too that students will need to have, and we're thinking with the teacher lens on too, a new skill set that the teachers will need to have. Rather than setting one task that students can complete from start to finish with or without the use of AI, we will need to be more explicit about what is this skill that we're trying to develop. And I think this is a good thing for teaching. Too often we've started to lapse into the, oh, well, go and do this project and produce a final product, and I'll use that final product as a proxy for all this learning that you must have done in the process. A final essay is no longer a good proxy for learning because of what AI can do. So it's forcing us to say, well, no, the essay wasn't the goal. The thinking behind it was the goal. What's the thinking behind it? And so therefore we need to know as teachers what we can delegate to AI to focus on that key skill. And we do need to train students to do that as well. But that's a really good pickup from the report.
Yeah, and it goes with a bit of thinking, which is we cannot turn back the clock. This now exists, so therefore we have to work out what is new in this situation, and that's part of it as well. Yeah, great.
And that's very much something that I've been coming on this journey of. We can't make a decision about whether or not AI should be used. The world's going to make that decision based on how prevalent AI continues to be through financial factors and political decisions. But AI is there. It is being used. We need to stop pretending that people are cheating when they use it and actually see it as part of the learning process at the right times. And of course, as schools, we shield people from certain conditions. But you're right, it is there. AI is prevalent, AI is ambient, AI is universal. We need to take care to make sure we massage the conditions toward conducive learning rather than letting free rein.
Got it. Brilliant. Natasha, we better get back to you because there's still a bit more of the report to talk about.
Yeah, and there's less evidence for the last two conditions, and I'll talk about social arrangements. I mean, who's engaged in the learning activity? And one of the biggest concerns for me when I went through all of this research, Ray, is if you think about a classroom environment, students are working often collaboratively. They work together. However, so many of these studies were focused on student plus Gen AI alone. So we need to be mindful that this body of research reflects that individual learning. However, there was research looking at the role of the teacher. You know, is Gen AI more effective? Is the teacher more effective? Is a hybrid arrangement more effective? And there is evidence to support this complementary benefit of teacher and Gen AI together. So if you think about Gen AI, it's always there, it's always available. It can provide really immediate feedback for students, which can be really helpful. It can repeat explanations. Like a teacher, it doesn't get frustrated if the student asks the same question 10 times until they understand it. And it's really low stakes in terms of giving support so that it reduces that anxiety. They can ask what they would think to be silly questions without any fear of judgment. So it's really helpful in that regard. But I would say, and I'm sure Matt and Veronica would support me in saying this, the role of the teacher still continues to be incredibly valuable, if not more valuable now that we have Gen AI. Because they are the ones that understand their students. They can interpret their needs, they can notice when something is going awry, and they can make those really important pedagogical judgments. So teachers with Gen AI, I think, is a really useful arrangement, but teachers have a higher level role, I think, now that Gen AI is being introduced to take some of those lower level support tasks. But the research as well, I would say there is very limited research around this collaborative learning with Gen AI, which is a concern for me. But what it does say is that simply putting students together with Gen AI doesn't immediately result in Gen AI supported learning.
The students at the center, right? Then we've got the tool, then we got the tasks. What are the 5 areas again to remind our listeners?
If I was to think of it as three layers, in the middle is the learner, the second layer is the tool, the task, and the social arrangements. And then the third layer is that cultural institutional context which wraps around it.
Yes, gotcha. It makes complete sense. It's really interesting how it all connects together and you're the student at the center, because I think that's a unique piece. And you were talking there about gaps in terms of the research itself. Where would the next levels of research be then to identify that? Have you thought about the next phase of where research can go with this Natasha and Matt?
There is so much, and in the report, I think we talk about 8 different areas for future research, and I could talk about this
Yeah.
for a long time. But I would say
Okay.
just a couple of things that I think are really important. Firstly, so much of, and this speaks to the cultural and institutional context, right? Different
Yeah.
countries, different education systems, they have different norms, different ways of working. And it's really important to acknowledge that across this body of literature, so much of it is concentrated in particular locations. And I would say China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, the United States are probably the top 4 off the top of my head.
Okay.
So little of this research has come from Australia. There were only a small number of papers that were research located in Australia. And that for me is a huge concern. So we
Wow.
need more
Yeah.
research here in Australian schools, understanding what it looks like in our local context.
And that's where we come in. That's our goal. As a close to practice research institution seeking to create a body of evidence about this work, we are undertaking projects. We have more to come. But in relation to what Natasha said, it's not just about one institution. Our goal is to be able to partner with a variety of institutions too. So we welcome other people to get in touch so we can explore some of these general effects, because we do need to work out what's happening in the real context. That's another message to every individual
Yeah.
teacher in each school. Just because these are the general rules, the research doesn't only give the general rules, it says it's all contextual too, which comes back to the fact that students know their class. It doesn't matter what universal truth we've proclaimed in this report. You know your class, and you need to assess whether a tool is working. A tool that works in my class may not work in yours. So if you try it out and decide that it's a good idea, monitor the effects. See how those individual students are responding, whether it's helping or hurting their learning. And that's where I think teachers are researchers. Every single day, teachers are conducting mini research projects in their minds because they're watching for student
That's true.
responses. And so that's why
Yeah.
I love being a close to practice research institute, because we're telling our colleagues, regardless of their research experience, they have valuable research informed stories to share, because that's where the reality of all this plays out, keeping students at the centre.
And I would add one word of caution and then another desperate area of need for future research. There is one study that sticks out in my mind. I think it was in Vietnam. They compared a public to a private school to see whether Gen AI versus teacher support was more helpful, and the results were completely opposite across the 2 schools. That says to me that potentially we will see different effects in different types of schools, right? So I would caution people to interpret this understanding that the evidence may be different in different institutional contexts, different cultures as well. The other area where I think we desperately need more research is in the younger years. So we were looking at pre-K to 12, but when you look at where all of these papers sit, there is such a large proportion sitting in high school and those more senior years. And I think it potentially reflects the fact that that's where we're seeing more Gen AI use. But we really need
Yeah.
to understand what's happening in primary school, in kindergarten, in pre-K, to be able to have a better picture of that landscape.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because a lot of the research that we look at is even like higher ed. To find the K-12 stuff's hard enough. And I feel for teachers at the minute, because the rhetoric in Australia, in the news and things, exactly like you said, Matt, earlier on, that people are looking at cognitive offloading, they're picking up on some of the clickbait headlines, and I really hope that the ministers in Australia are reading your report and understanding it and taking the nuance in. And I love the way that the triangulations happened with you all, because you can see just in this conversation how amazing the connection has been, where Natasha, you're doing the research, and Matt, you're seeing what's happening in the classroom, and it's all connected together. And Veronica, you're bringing the thing to life and getting those examples and finding the detail. It's phenomenal.
Thank you, Dan. And I think you're right that teachers feel under siege. We're being accused of not caring for our students enough and just offloading our jobs to AI. That's the last thing that we want to do. No teacher will knowingly give students a tool that will shortcut the learning process because we care about our students too much. We just need the knowledge to be able to do this well, and we're hoping that the literature review might form a part of it. But it is a very political conversation. Recently, it's been talked about whether there can even be take-home assessments at all. The New South Wales government and New South Wales Department of Education, NESA, the assessment body, is talking about whether we remove entirely take-home assessments from year 11 and year 12. And our response to that is actually to pursue, like you were talking about, a new area of research. We need to research what effective take-home long-form assessment tasks look like in the age of AI.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we will work with the systems at play. We support them 100%, but we are not ready to give up on long-form take-home assessment tasks throughout the entire school, because that's a really important part of student functioning, student project work, and putting things together. There's no way we're putting everyone through only exams, but that's an area of research that we need to pursue more to demonstrate that it can be done effectively and usefully.
Yeah, I love this because this exactly matches things we've talked about. The heavy amount of research that is effectively done in universities about AI in education, and the absolute paucity of it within the school space. And that second question, which I think we've talked with a lot of people about, we've seen a lot of papers and opinions that we've interviewed a lot of people about, which is this: what does assessment look like in the age of AI? Because it isn't back to the old way of doing things. Something new will emerge from this, but I don't think any of us know quite what it is going to be. So you're right, there's got to be a lot of focus in this area. I love this paper. I think it's so useful for schools and teachers to be able to look at. And I want to compliment you on one thing that makes this head and shoulders stand out about over almost any other research paper, which is that you've published it fast. You haven't held up for 12 months while some decides whether it's okay to publish it, but it's out in a timely manner. It's out free for teachers, whereas there's a lot of research that they can't read. I think you're doing a fantastic public service with this, as well as brilliant research.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Dan. And that's exactly our purpose. We want it shared so that the students benefit. And if that means people share it in their own way and use it for their own purposes, we are delighted.
Now, as usual, we will put the link to the research paper into the show notes. I don't know how many people will go and click that link, so let's tell them what to search for. If they just remember to go and search for Barker Institute AI Research, I'm pretty sure they will find the link to the paper, but the actual link will be in the show notes.
That is correct. Barker Institute AI Research will certainly lead you in the right direction and take you eventually to the formal publication through the Sydney University Library.
And I would say for those that don't want to read the report itself, but are interested after listening to the podcast, we also recorded a couple of webinars, so you'll be able to access them through doing that same search, I believe.
Right.
Brilliant.
It's so good, and we can't wait to see what's next and what's coming through. Yes, phenomenal work.
Thanks for great accessible research, Veronica and Natasha. Thank Danny and Lena as well. You've done a great job putting it together. And Matt, I love the fact that it's so practical, and I love the fact it's funded. So thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Yeah, great work.